Hey everyone, welcome back to another Mattel Jurassic World review. Today we take a look at their massive biters, Albertosaurus. This figure is part of the last wave of Primal attack before the line rolls into Dino Escape, and it's also the first time the Albertosaurus has made an appearance in the main line. The previous two versions were exclusive to the Battle Damage line, so if you missed out on those two earlier versions, this is a great way to finally add the species to your collection. This figure is currently popping up at Targets across the US. It retails for $19.99, but at the time of this review, there is a slight catch with this figure and the other new ones being released. For some reason, they're not scanning at the register that's coming up, not on file, so just grab a Target employee and they'll gladly help you out and get this figure run out for you. So let's just go over the package really quick before we crack this figure open. You got the Jurassic World logo up in the corner. You got the nice sunset background with the paddock fences, Owen and blue as always. And then spinning around, you got a nice full art picture of how the massive biter action works on this Albertosaurus. And then down here in the bottom corner is its wave mate, the repaint of the Sarcosuchus. And I do like this mold, but unfortunately I am not a fan of this very colorful paint scheme on a crocodilian, so I'm definitely gonna pass on this one. The original massive biter Sarcosuchus is fine for me. So with the package out of the way, let's crack this figure open and take a closer look. So let's start out with a nice 360-degree view of this massive biter's Albertosaurus. I've always been a huge fan of this mold ever since it came out, I think about 2 years ago in the Battle Damage line. And I really like the color scheme on here. It's mostly a darker green with these bright orange stripes along the side of the body and a little bit of white under the throat. My biggest complaint is when the first promotional images of this figure came out, it was a much brighter green and red and yellow, and it kind of looked like they were trying to emulate the Jungle Explorer color scheme on this Albertosaurus, and that actually had me really excited. I kind of thought that was a cool little homage to the original vehicle from Jurassic Park. So when the official images came out of this thing in packages, I was a little bit disappointed by the much more muted color scheme, but still I do really like this color scheme, even though it doesn't really look like what I was expecting. So let's just do a couple quick measurements on this figure. This figure is from tip of the snout, tip of the tail, is about 14 inches long and just about 6 inches high to the top of the neck. So Albertosaurus in real life was 30 to 33 feet long. So with those measurements, I'll put this figure somewhere in the 125 to the 128 scale range. So let's zoom in and take a closer look at some of the finer details in this figure, starting with this gorgeous head sculpt. I've always loved the head sculpt on this Albertosaurus. I think it's very well done. You have a lot of nice fine scale detail along the head. The teeth are beautifully sculpted. They are painted off-white, and there's really no sloppy paint on mine. The bottom jaw has a lot of beautiful scale variation. The eye is painted in yellow with a black pupil. Then you have that bright orange stripe that starts right in the innerorbital fenestra, and it goes all the way down to about the hind legs. And then going down to the neck, you get some really large spikes and osteoderms along the side and top of the neck. And those spikes continue almost all the way down to the tip of the tail. And then going down to the hands, you can see the hands are sculpted really nice. The hand claws are not painted in. And then you have a little bit of like a muted yellow for the throat region right here. And then going down to the hind legs are beautifully sculpted. A lot of nice muscle detail. You get some more large scales sculpted in right there. And I have to say the feet on this Albertosaurus, even though they're a little bit oversized, they are not as bad as they are on the T-Rex figures and the Carnotaurus. They look much more proportionate. I kind of wish Mattel would work on the feet to the T-Rex, make it a little bit more proportionate looking. The toe claws are painted in a dark brown color. And let's turn it over so you guys can get the scan code for the fax app. And then going down to the tail. Now the tail is the issue I've always had with this figure. I always thought it was very small. It's probably the smallest proportionate tail I think on like any of the figures in the line. Hopefully someday maybe Mattel will release one with the tail unattached with a little bit longer tail to make the figure look a lot better. Now this does look like a simple repaint retool of the Battle Damage Albertosaurus, but the body and the tail have been resculpted. If you see right here, there's a lot more fine detail on the body right here. If my camera wants to cooperate and zoom in, there we go. And here is the Battle Damage one. You can see the detail on this one is much more fine and defined on the newer version compared to the older one. Even when you look at the tail on this one has much more finer sculpting detail on it. So definitely those two parts were remolded to incorporate the massive biter's action. Articulation is pretty much the same as it was on the battle damage feature, except it actually has a little bit less articulation because most of it is tied into the massive biter's action. The front arms can move forwards and backwards, and they are both on a hinge that allows you to swing the arms out. Now, both legs do not move independently. They are tied into that massive biter's action. They have a couple of different ratcheting points to lock the figure into place. And then you have some ankle rotation. There is no more hip pivot because of the massive biters feature. And that is it for articulation. So let's move on to its action feature. So to activate the massive biters feature on this, you just need to push this button at the base of the tail, and that will cause the mouth to close. And then by holding onto the front feet, you can rotate the head side to side. There's no up and down movement except if you just move the legs up and down. So let's get a victim in here. Let's get in poor John Hammond and have this Albertosaurus just shake the living crap out of him. Now, the only downside to this massive biters feature is you lose the articulation on the jaw and on the neck. With the original battle damage Albertosaurus, you could actually close the mouth and rotate the head down and up and side to side and stay in that position. So if you're not messing around with this figure is going to be locked into this position. So that's like another downside of this feature. So let's move on with some comparisons. First up, here it is with Darius. And next up, here it is with the battle damage Gasosaurus. And next up is the Savage Strike Delta. And here it is with some of the other new figures I have recently reviewed on the channel. Here it is with Grim the Baryonyx and the new Soundstrike Triceratops. And here it is with the other Albertosaurus from Mattel, the original Battle Damage one that came out a couple years ago. The Battle Damage 2.0, which for some reason has not made an appearance in the US. The Battle Damage line for the last year or so has been an absolute mess with distribution. I still have very tiny hopes that this could possibly show up for the holiday shopping season, even though that's only a few days away. So I guess time will tell. And this one right here is just a repaint of this battle damage Albertosaurus. I remember around this time last year, Walmart was doing major clearance on their Jurassic World stuff, and I was able to pick up a couple of these for $5. So out of these three Albertosaurs, the new Massive Biters is definitely my favorite color scheme, followed by the Battle Damage 2.0, and pulling up the rear is the original Battle Damage. I still love all three of these figures, even though they're the same mold. It's definitely one of my favorite Jurassic World figures Mattel has definitely put out. And something else I just noticed having these Albertosaurs out, looks like both legs on the Massive Biters are also new sculpts. You can see they are in a different position compared to the old Battle Damage one, especially since this one has actually sculpted in Battle Damage. So yeah, so I guess a lot of new parts on here. The main body, the tail, and the hind legs all look like new sculpted material. And lastly, here's a nice group shot of the other Tyrannosaurs Mattel has given us over the last couple years. The back over here is the Ultimate T-Rex. Here's the Massive Biters Albertosaurus, the Battle Damage Proceratosaurus, Attack Pack Allioramos, and the Massive Biters Tarbosaurus. So we got a nice variety of Tyrannosaur family members in the line, and hopefully we'll get a few more in the years to come from Mattel. So, final thoughts on this new Albertosaurus. Every time I review this mold, I always highly recommend it. I think it's one of the best theropod molds Mattel has done. My only real complaint is the tail is hilariously short, and that doesn't look like that's going to be changing for the time being. And like I said earlier, if you missed out on the first two battle damage versions, this is an excellent way to add the species to your collection. Even though this is my third time seeing this mold, this is still among one of my favorite theropod molds Mattel has ever done. And remember, this figure is currently being found at Targets across the US, so happy hunting. So that will do it for the review. I only have a couple more figures in the Primal Attack line I'm looking for. Just the Troodon and the Retro Repaint Gallimimus. And once I get my hands on those, that will pretty much do it for Primal Attack reviews on the channel until we roll into Dino Escape, which probably, knowing like it did last year with Primal Attack, it probably will show up by the end of the year, very beginning of the year. And as always, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, show your support by hitting that subscription button just below the video. Each subscription helps out the channel tremendously, and it's greatly appreciated. And I'll see you guys for the next one.